Good afternoon. Welcome to today's TASA webinar, Bus Passenger Safety. Passengers expect to go from point A to point B safely. Upon embarking on a bus trip, the passenger places his or her fate in the operator's hands, and it's a reasonable expectation that the bus driver will take due care of the passenger. Needless to say, the safety of bus passengers is a major concern of the industry and the traveling public. Passenger injury results from slips and falls while boarding or leaving the bus, injuries while on board the bus, and injuries accessing and leaving the bus stop. This seminar will discuss a number of topics that will affect passenger safety, including driver selection and hiring practices, driver behavior and human error, driver training and retraining, safety programs, guidelines for acceleration, deceleration, and sudden turns, right turn, left turn, and bus stop collisions, design and location of bus stops, vehicle design and safety, and finally, national standards of passenger care. The presenter for today's program is Dr. Carl Berkowitz. Dr. Berkowitz has 48 years of transportation and traffic engineering experience. He has served as a litigation consultant and held various positions in industry, government, and higher education, with extensive experience in planning, design, safety, security, construction, maintenance, operations, and management. He holds a BCE in civil engineering and an MBA in industrial management from the City College of New York, an MS in transportation planning, and a PhD in transportation planning and engineering from NYU Poly. In addition to his work involving pedestrians and virtually every form of transportation and its safety, including aviation and maritime, Dr. Berkowitz has written numerous reports and articles for major publications, chaired task forces, appeared on national television and radio, and made numerous scholarly presentations worldwide. He holds memberships in many transportation professional associations. Dr. Berkowitz's areas of expertise include transportation accident studies, slips, trips, and falls, pedestrian passenger accidents, perception reaction capabilities, subway, commuter rail, Amtrak, and freight train pedestrian and passenger accidents, speed and distance analysis, event recorder analysis, right-of-way geometry, railroad highway grade crossings, right-of-way trespass, pedestrian train collisions, passenger bus train occupancy safety, and passenger station terminal safety. We will take questions and answers throughout today's program on the fly. Please use the chat feature or Q&A feature located on the right-hand side of the screen to submit your questions to the presenter. I'm highlighting their location with my pointer right now. Tomorrow morning, I'll send out an email with a link to the archived recording of this webinar, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that was used during the program. We do ask that you take time to fill out the survey that will appear on your screen after the webinar is over. I now invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm going to turn the presentation over to our distinguished guest, Dr. Carl Berkowitz. Carl, the program's all yours.
Thank you very much, Matt. Let's get going. As Matt has pointed out, our basic objective is to look at how we can reduce injuries to bus passengers, which are the result of land-based collisions, injuries to passengers while boarding, riding, and leaving the bus. And basically, we're going to be dealing with the entire bus environment. That's getting to the bus stop, boarding the bus, taking the safe trip, and disembarking. Historically, we tend to blame the passenger pedestrian that is involved in the bus accident for not being careful or watching where they're going. But this may not necessarily be the case. The safety of bus passengers is a major concern, as Matt pointed out, to operators. And despite many efforts on the part of operators and government and research and what have you, the number of injuries that result from interaction with buses, whether being a passenger or being a pedestrian on the street, this number continues to be very high. And we have to take a look at the various critical roles that are played to see how we can make the system safer. And we will start with the vehicle operating and the access that's provided and the training of the operator of the vehicles. the bus driver themselves. There are some legal considerations. Recent court decisions have found that transit agencies are obliged not only to be responsible to the passenger on board, but also the passenger as they interface with the bus. That's the bus stop, the access to bus stops, and things of that nature. Recent legal cases on transit access have found that transit agencies bear some responsibility to ensure that their passengers can access stops and stations safely, even on property that doesn't even belong to the operating organization. We're going to talk about buses generically, but the types of buses that are generally we can find in service are these types of buses: the minibuses, the standard city bus, the double-decker buses, which are in the United States mostly for tourism, but in England there are standard buses, mid-sized buses, the coach buses, and buses that are catching on in the scene. Those are articulated buses, where two buses are put together to form one bus. Statistics say that bus travel is safer than car travel, and that is true. And many of the injuries that are caused and we find in the bus environment can be prevented, such as impact with other vehicles, impact with stationary objects, impact with pedestrians, and injuries, especially injuries to occupants, which are involving non-collision situations, where the person on the bus slips or falls or has some kind of accident, which is not the result of a collision between the bus and some other vehicle or object. If we look at the accidents that, in a general sense, you can see that non-collision accidents almost equal to all the other accidents that occur in the bus environment. If we look over the last, the information that's presently available through 2008, we see that almost on an annual basis it's been somewhat constant with the number of buses and the number of personal injuries. That each year there's been between 20 to 30,000 accidents between the period of 2004 and 2008. And the number of buses has increased slightly from 800,000 to 840,000 in that same time period. There's been a lot of headline information about buses, bus coach fatalities and buses turning over, and whether the operators and drivers of the buses are suitable. For example, in the New York area, the right to operate has been removed from 17 motor coach operators in the New York area who operated primarily along the East Coast. In 2009, preliminary information indicates that there were 720 million passenger trips, and the fatalities that resulted were primarily from rollovers and 70% from ejections. And one of the problems that we have in terms of bus operations, that buses do not have to meet the same standard as cars and planes, and there's been a lot of effort on the part of Washington to improve safety through introducing new safety features into buses. One of the features that is coming down the pike, which hasn't yet arrived, and there's a lot of opposition to it, and that's the use of seatbelts on buses. Whether or not this will ever come to be on school buses and on some coaches in some states, they already require seatbelts. Well, the seatbelts will ever be required in local transit operations or all coach operations is yet to be determined. Personally, I think it's a good idea. I don't think it will sell very well with most of the traveling public. There's been a lot of studies on bus accidents, and Volvo has done a tremendous amount of work on rollovers, and when passengers are restrained, they have a high likelihood of not being seriously injured, and there is a minimum opportunity for ejection from the bus. The types of accidents that have been recorded in terms of bus operations are listed here, and I'm not going to get into too much detail, but you can see it's almost anything you can think of about a bus, and that has been the result, has resulted in an accident. A lot of the accidents also have been attributed to the bus driver and the operation of the equipment on the bus by the operator themselves, including the mirrors yielding in right-of-way, following too closely to vehicles in front, failing to use mirrors, fatigue, all sorts of things have been recorded as causes of accidents that can be directly attributed to bus drivers. Looking at the bus occupant safety history, you can see that in 2008 there were 67,000 fatalities, and there were injuries of 15,000, and there were many, many vehicle injuries that didn't result in any accidents or injuries. Those bus occupants who are injured, this is a breakdown of the parts of their anatomy that are affected. And you can see most of the primary injuries are upper body injuries, and lesser amount to lower body injuries. But lower limbs and head and upper limbs are the predominant areas where the injuries occur. This is kind of obvious. How do we prevent these types of accidents? Is by removing the hazardous condition in the first place. And we'll talk about those various environments. One place to begin in terms of the bus design is the interior of the bus, and these are some of the things that need to be taken into consideration to make the bus safe, and, which includes the designs of the handrails and stanchions and steps and doorways and what has been introduced lately in bus design is what we call the low vehicle floor bus, which brings the bus close to the bus stop or to the street pavement, and this is not this type of bus replaces the type of buses that were called the kneeling buses. But in the case of the low vehicle bus, we eliminate a lot of the stairs and a lot of the injuries that are the result of climbing stairs or exiting the bus using stairs.
Excuse me, Carl, we have a question that has come in from Darren. Would you like to take it?
Sure.
Darren asks, do you have any experience with bus routing? And if so, is there any correlation between a given bus route and increased risk of injury because of the route the bus chose?
Generally, in transit operations, the bus routes are very carefully selected, and over time they're refined, and they usually are limited to streets that are what we would call arterial streets, streets that can handle heavy traffic. This is not generally the case with school buses. The question is, school buses sometimes don't select the best streets and the best routes. In general, transit buses do.
Okay, and we have another question here from Stuart, who asks, what is the proper procedure for the bus operator when approaching a bus stop that is covered by a scaffolding?
Well, if my personal opinion, if there was a scaffolding on the sidewalk and there was a bus stop there, I would eliminate that bus stop. The criteria for which we will get into for a safe bus stop, the scaffolding's presence makes that an unsuitable location for a bus stop.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carl. I don't see any other questions, so please continue on.
Certainly. The pedestrian interaction is very important, and a lot of accidents occur on the street level as a result of right turns, left turns. We're going to get into that as pedestrians are approaching bus stops, and the various movements that the buses make, and the inability sometimes of the bus operator to see the pedestrian. It's important to have very safe pathways and locations for pedestrians to walk, and this is a key factor in ensuring the safe location of bus stops. And sometimes this is not really taken into consideration, is that you may establish a bus stop, but the pedestrian has to gain access to that bus stop. And these are some of the criteria or my standards of what would make a safe crossing to a bus stop. Also, it's important to provide information. Without information, it's very difficult for a passenger or pedestrian to understand the environment. And these are four of the areas that I think are important. There should be edge markings, the delineating crossing points. There should be signage that's clear and understandable, not 13 or 14 signs on one post and that create confusion. Signage, it needs to be simple, just as we taught in the Army. Keep it simple, KISS. That's very important in signage. The more complicated the signage becomes, the less usable it becomes. Controls need to be passive and active. Information needs to be provided in all forms. Signage, passive, active, edge. This is some sampling of some new signs that have just been introduced. Have been changed from yellow to this pale green, and this is the new signage that can be found in the new Uniform Manual of Traffic Control Devices, and really makes it a lot more clear about pedestrian safety and where pedestrians are crossing and providing safe pedestrian information. This is an overhead sign that's now being applied to remind in states, especially where pedestrians always have the right-of-way. In some states, the pedestrian has the right-of-way no matter where they enter the public right-of-way. Whether it's mid-block, anywhere they enter, they always have the right-of-way. The needs that passengers have, the manual uniform traffic control devices provides a lot of very good standard information that helps and guides in the planning of providing passenger information. Information is important at every step in the process, going from the crosswalk to the bus stop to boarding the bus, and all that needs to be articulated and in a friendly environment. There are special cases which require special consideration, where there's a bus situation, even besides school buses, where children are involved. We have to keep in mind how difficult it is for a child to cross the street and also to visualize a bus coming and to board the bus. All those issues are of multiple concern when you're dealing with children. Older pedestrians are not dissimilar from children in terms of their needs and requirements. Their needs and requirements are quite similar to children. So we sort of go in a cycle from when we were a child to when we become older. Our needs and requirements become very similar. Even more in need of special attention and assistance are people with disabilities, which can range from wheelchair disabilities to disabilities involving hearing and seeing, and this all needs to be taken into consideration when planning and operating a bus operation. One of the areas that we sometimes fail to take into consideration is where there's a large immigration population and there is a lack of understanding of English, and that's why the need to have signage that not only has words but also has pictures that explain the situation, so that a person that is not familiar with English can also make use of the system. This has been pioneered in Europe and other places, and we're beginning to take advantage of those techniques that have been developed elsewhere and applying them in the United States. When laying out the bus stop, as I mentioned before, when the person mentioned about scaffolding, I think that the bus stop needs to be unobstructed, and it should be an unobstructed access to and from that stop. And if you have scaffolding and other things cluttering the sidewalk, we certainly can't accomplish that. Also, excuse me, it becomes difficult if you have scaffolding along the curb to bring the bus close enough so that people can step off the bus onto the curb and not end up stepping into the street, which is an additional 4 to 6 inches, depending upon how many layers of new pavement have been placed on the roadway. We're talking about 4 to 6 inches additional if the bus is unable to pull up to the curb or to the bus stop area, which hopefully will have a curb. In terms of where do you locate the bus stop, there are many things to take into consideration in terms of being able to put the facilities in that location that are needed, such as shelter, signage, walkways, pathways, staying away from driveways, and the ability also to meet the American Disabilities Act and the architectural guidelines that have been established, the ADA-AG architectural guidelines.
Carl, we have a couple more questions in the queue. Can we address them next time? Okay. To follow up on the questions asked about bus routes, how generally are school bus routes determined?
Hopefully they're determined by a person who's been properly trained, but in many cases the person who gets the job of running the bus operation in a small community doesn't have any training, and they operate sometimes from the seat of their pants without the kind of knowledge which is readily available out there, and they select streets that are inappropriate for any kind of bus operation. They create situations where children have to make dangerous crossings. They also create situations where there's not enough room for the bus to pass with other traffic. There's numerous kinds of things. There are a number of organizations out there that provide training, such as in New York State, the Pupil Institute, it's called PTSI, Pupil Transportation Safety Institute. They contract with the state of New York and others to do training of the bus supervisor for a district and bus operators and matrons and everything else. There is a lot of training material out there. There are national organizations that do it, and there are local. And unfortunately, a lot of the school districts that are small do not train their personnel properly, and sometimes the selection of that person has less to do with knowledge and more to do with who they know, unfortunately.
Okay, great. We have another question here from Lawrence who asks, what's the responsibility of the driver when dealing with a wheelchair elderly passenger, i.e. picking up the wheelchair person and the seat belting of that said person?
That's correct. That's the responsibilities. The first thing is that it's a bus that can accommodate the wheelchair in the first place. Not every single bus can accommodate wheelchairs. The buses that can accommodate wheelchairs are some of the low-level buses can come close to the curb, and a person in a wheelchair can come right directly on the bus. Other buses that have stairs have wheelchair lifts that come out of the front or the back of the bus. Coaches, of course, have only front doors, so the wheelchair lift comes out of the front of the bus. And these wheelchair lifts technology has been around for a very long time. Once the person's on board, it's the obligation of the operator to make sure that they're secure. And there are various types of secure devices that are available on buses, and the passenger in the wheelchair is unable to provide the securement, and so that needs to be done by the bus driver.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions in the queue, so why don't we continue on to the presentation of content.
This is in terms of the bus stop environment, the kinds of things that we would like to see at the bus stop, including such things as bicycle parking, which I'm very fond of personally. These are the kinds of things to take into consideration when a bus stop is not appropriate. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details since this is all going to be posted, and at your leisure you can take a look at these characteristics. There are three general types of bus stop locations. We refer to them as the far side, the near side, and mid-block. Far side being in the direction that the bus is traveling on the other side of the intersection. Near side would be before the intersection, and the mid-block, of course, is when you have a very long stretch between intersections, the bus stop being located between those intersections. These are some of the criteria in deciding whether or not it should be a far side or a near side or a mid-block location. It's not very complicated. It's based basically upon the type of activity that is taking place at that particular location. And of course, it is very, very important to place a bus stop in a safe location so as not to create not only conflict between the bus and the pedestrians and the passengers, but also with the vehicles that are traveling on the same roadway. There are many designs. These are just a general look at the far side, near side, and the different kinds of options, including having a bike lane and a bus stop and I leave that for you to look at your leisure. This is what a bus stop with a parking lane and a bus stop with extra wide curb lane. This is some examples of what we talked about, and that's the best place to place a bus stop, considering whether the bus is moving straight ahead or making a left turn, right turn, the size of the roadways, and things of that nature. And of course, where do you locate them when you have multiple lanes and multiple interactions and conflicts? This is just a typical bus stop design, showing some of the typical dimensions. In most cases, bus stops are designed for at least two buses stopping at the same time, at least in the urban areas. In rural areas, that may not necessarily be the case. This is just a simple diagrammatic of a bus stop with multiple berths, bus stop stops, first stop, second position. This is just the layout with of a bus stop with a curb at the bus stop. There are many criteria that have been set up by the American Disabilities Act in the designing of a bus stop, and this tries to articulate the various considerations, considering the curb cuts and the slopes and the size of the various facilities, so that a person with a wheelchair can maneuver around the various appurtenances that may be located at the passenger loading and the shelter area. There are some examples of different types of bus stops. One example of how not to is the example at the top left, which happens to be in London, actually, and you can see that the particular bus stop is really totally cluttered. We want to have a clean bus stop, such as you can see on the bottom two photographs, where we have basically a clean bus stop, where there's no interference between the bus and the passengers that are going to board the bus. Two kind of interesting ones. The one that's on the right, excuse me, is in Brazil, and has. When I was years ago working in the city of New York, we had one of them shipped up to us, and we tried to demonstrate it and use it in the City Hall area, and it worked very well. But there were other complications in terms of space. But this bus shelter, bus stop, serves also as the fare collection, and it enables the passengers to board the bus straight on from the bus area. And the area in Brazil where this was started is called Curitiba. One thing that the bus operator and the bus company has difficulty in dealing with is when we have passengers with unsafe behavior. And these are some of the areas where bus passengers cause problems for the bus operator and for themselves. The type of enforcement that has been used in terms of catching people going through, vehicles going through red lights, people speeding, is now being tested to catch pedestrians also violating the rules and regulations of the road. Most people don't realize it, but there are motor vehicle traffic laws that apply to pedestrians, and pedestrians can be summoned and ticketed for violating those rules and regulations. Catching them is another matter. Photography is being introduced as one way of perhaps doing that. Let's speak a little bit now about bus operators, bus drivers. You can see that there are a lot of bus drivers out there. In 2008, there were almost 650,000 bus drivers, and you can see how they break down between transit and intercity coaches and school buses. And we can expect that this is still going to be a growth industry, and we're going to see many, many more bus drivers out there in the work environment. For a bus driver to be a safe bus driver, they need to be focused, they need to observe the right-of-way, they have to be ready to focus on an unexpected event, they have to always follow the law and the rules and regulations, and have to keep in mind that they're working a long, hard workday, especially the transit bus operators, maybe not necessarily the school bus operators, but the school bus operators have intensive workloads over short periods of time, and they're dealing with a very, very precious cargo, which puts a lot of stress on them as well. They have to be sure that they focus their attention, and they need to have the expertise to deal with any kind of emergency. They need to be constantly trained, retrained, and retrained. This needs to be endless and needs to be on a continuous basis. A lot of information is now coming forward about how important one applying attention and how there are many things that take place in our environment which cause our attention to be divided over more than one task. This creates a bit of a problem because it is very important to be able to apply one's attention to the job at hand and be able to filter out that which is not important and deal with that which is important. And we talked about that as being the ability to have attention control and the ability to interpret information, to deal with information, and to react to information in a safe manner. The driver of any vehicle, and especially buses, they are faced with many, many distractions. One, of course, is passenger behavior. One is their own distraction. Many bus operators have been caught on video using cell phones and other electronics, whether they were stopped at a bus stop or while they were in operation. And of course, medical situations also play a small role in this situation. Let's take a look at the driver and human error. This is a summary of the types of human errors that have been reported in various studies as to the driver and what can be anticipated as things that need to be carefully looked at and looked after, such things as driver attention, perception, knowledge, the knowledge of the rules so that they avoid rule violations and procedural errors, that we minimize slips, lapses, mistakes, and that every driver comes to work not tired, not fatigued, but in good condition to do a good job.
Excuse me, Carl. Excuse me, can we take a question right now?
Sure.
Anthony asked, if a bus is overcrowded, how, if at all, does it affect the driver's level of care? Or should the driver not operate the bus if it's too crowded?
This is a very good question. In many cities, they try to avoid buses being overcrowded. In some cities, because of the high volume of passengers, it's sometimes unavoidable. But before a bus operator leaves the bus stop and begins to operate, he or she should make sure that the bus passenger is secure. That is, that wherever there is a seat, that seat is occupied. If there's a disabled person, they are given the seats in the priority area, and that everybody who is standing is holding on and is away from the driver's workstation area. And usually just after the driver workstation area is a white line, and people should be not standing on the steps, and they should not be standing close to the driver on the other side of that white line. This might be heresy, but if I was the operator of the bus, I would ask anybody who could not conform to these requirements to take the next bus. Ask them to leave this bus and please take the next bus. And the bus operator should try to avoid any of these conditions from occurring in the first place.
Okay, we have a question from Donald who asks, on a chartered bus, does any of the responsibility for passenger activity fall on the trip organizer / customer?
The charter bus is a coach bus and is governed by federal regulations in terms of the duties, responsibilities, and the safety of the bus. And I imagine one of the things that probably happens, people will start moving around, and that may not be a very good idea. People should remain seated or move from one seat to another. And I guess some of the problems that occur on these charter buses is that the passenger behavior is not ideal. And I guess I'm not an expert on the responsibilities of the organizer, but I do know that the bus operator, the bus driver, has responsibilities to try to maintain order on the bus and to ensure that every passenger on the bus is seated.
Okay, and just one more here from Lawrence who asks, what kind of class license or endorsement do drivers need to transport disabled people? Does the bus company or the driver have to enforce the training such as CPR, etc.? And is the bus company or driver required to keep a log of his or her driving hours?
Well, bus drivers are required to keep a log of their driving hours so they don't exceed the hours the number of hours that they're permitted to drive. I'm not that familiar with the training. I know there is additional training provided to paratransit bus drivers beyond they're trained on securing the passengers, on CPR. I'm not familiar with the license requirements. They do require a commercial, if the bus is of a certain size, they do require a commercial driver's license with the bus endorsements. I'm not an expert on that. Where you can get that information is Easter Seals in Washington. They have a website, and on that website there are brochures, training brochures for everything that that was mentioned in the question. So that's Easter Seals, Washington, D.C.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Carl. I don't see any other questions in the queue, so why don't we continue on with the presentation of content?
Okay. Let's look a little bit at the driver selection, which is very important. These are some of the categories that should be considered. Eyesight, hearing, of course, alcohol, narcotics, and drugs, of course, significant accidents. Physical exams are important because the bus operator has precious cargoes, whether it's children, adults, or seniors. And the driving records, all this information is important in the case of selecting the driver. Of course, being able to communicate with the passengers, having the right license, such as the Class C license, background checks, interviews, performance evaluations, all are very, very important. These are the key aspects of driver training. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but it deals with the full spectrum of operating the bus from the getting behind the wheel to dealing with emergency situations. In the driver training, things that need to be covered are such topics as prevention of accidents, performance of the job, safety training, and this is all done just industry-wide. This is done by almost every transit agency that I've ever had dealings with has a program which mirrors this description.
Carl, before you move on, we have a couple questions that have come in regarding driver training and driver requirements. Can we go over those real fast?
Sure.
Stephanie asked, should a driver wait until a passenger has paid his or her fare before leaving the bus stop and starting to drive the vehicle?
The bus driver should do even more than that, should make sure that the passenger is secure. And that means if there's available seats on the bus, that the person is seated.
Okay. Dina asked, is the same requirement for private livery service vehicles? So I guess the same training requirements and licensure requirements?
I'm not familiar with private livery that much. My familiarity with private livery is that they get minimum training. They're not as well regulated. In New York City, for example, private livery has become the black cars, and they are trying to regulate them more and more in terms of bringing them under the umbrella of vehicle safety and driver safety.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions, so let's continue on with the presentation.
There are actual videos. You find it kind of hard to believe, but these are videos of drivers texting and using their cell phones, and these were recorded by cameras that were on the buses, and I don't want to get into too much detail what happens with these operators, but you can imagine. drivers have concerns. We've been talking about our concerns of the driver, but the drivers have concerns too. And these are some of the concerns they have in terms of operating the bus and the problems that they encounter in just the daily job of being a bus operator, bus driver. There's also technical issues that they are concerned with, such as storage of personal items, strollers coming on board buses. What do you do with their own personal belongings? Where do they store those? What about people opening windows? Many of the new buses don't have windows, so that's not an issue. But what about in the cases where the windows are open and people stick their arms out and heads out? We've all seen pictures of that in movies, but it's not a joking situation. These are all serious matters and technical issues that bus drivers are concerned with. Coming on stream very shortly, and it's been tested, and this is advanced warning, giving bus operators the ability to detect pedestrians crossing in front of their path, and this is being expanded to pedestrians coming into the path of the bus on the right side and the left side, not only in the front of the bus. This technology is being tested around the United States. It's part of a program called Intelligent Transportation Systems, and a lot of this should be on board within a few years. There's a consideration now also to have backup cameras on all vehicles, not only buses, but on motor vehicles as well, and there's talk of a date of 2014 when new vehicles built in the year 2014 would be equipped with rear cameras and hopefully advanced warning as well. When you're riding a bus, this is what it looks like at 15 miles an hour, and this is what the bus driver sees at 40 miles an hour. And you can see that the reaction time and the time needed to respond to an emergency is severely affected by speed. And the pedestrians and bicyclists out there need to take that into consideration. Even though they may have the right of way, they got to consider the vehicles that are operating in the traffic stream. And the stopping distance of a bus it doesn't happen instantaneously. There is a perception reaction time that's needed before the braking can be applied, and any interference with that perception reaction time can result in serious consequences. Just taking into consideration, this is a pedestrian out on the street. It's reasonable to expect that it will take about a second and a half, and if you're going 20 miles an hour, that's 30 feet before one can apply the brakes in recognition of an emergency. And take into consideration that pedestrians walk at the rate of 3 to 4 feet per second. And as I mentioned, there's a perception reaction time before the brakes can be applied. When operators are interviewed and there's been a collision between themselves and a vehicle or a pedestrian, they say they responded immediately, and of course this is impossible because the perception reaction time comes into play, and that second and a half or greater or less will intervene before the brakes are applied. Just to give you a sense of how distance adds up so quickly. And this is what a reaction time of 3/4 of a second. Now, when emergency braking is applied or braking is applied on the bus, it may be applied for a situation that's on the roadway or on the street, but it has an impact on the passengers. Sudden braking to passengers seated and also standing can result in them being endangered. And there are various criteria. Most of these criteria relate to the instantaneous acceleration. We have various things that come into consideration in operating a bus, and that's time and velocity. But the relationship in time and velocity is also the rate of acceleration and all the rate of deceleration. And if the rate of acceleration is too fast or deceleration is too fast, it can result in injuries to the passengers. And these are some of the values that are used in terms of what is considered a safe acceleration deceleration. It's very difficult to control One can control the amount of energy, the number of turns that the engine can make in terms of turning the wheels. We can control the number of revolutions, and that's can be determined in the RPM. The gauge on a vehicle, the RPMs is the number of times the crankshaft is turning. But what is not controllable is the braking, and you don't want to control the braking, and that requires the skills to control braking and to make it safe for passengers. Requires a high skill set on the part of the bus operator. These are some of the guidance that is given to bus drivers in terms of approaching the bus stop. Signal right that they're coming into the bus stop, position the bus, things of that nature. I'm going to go through this very fast. The bus passenger, these are the various stages of a bus passenger, from boarding to exiting the vehicle. These are the various activities that take place in that process of boarding the bus and also exiting the bus. In terms of the bus driver, this is what they have to do in terms of boarding and alighting passengers, in terms of operating the front door, or operating the rear doors, making sure that the doors are closed, make sure that they can observe the passengers on the bus, also the passengers, potential pedestrians that might be on the right, the left, or in the front of the bus, or a passenger who might be removing a bicycle from the front of the bus, from the bike racks. Many buses today have bike racks. The bus driver is provided with a lot of information through mirrors on the right side, left side, on the interior of the bus. Unfortunately, they don't have any information to the rear of the bus. Old buses years ago, you used to have rear windows. No longer is that available. That now is a mechanical department for the bus, and there is no way to see what's behind the bus. And there are, just like in driving an automobile, there are some blind spots on the sides, but the mirrors try to compensate for that, but not absolutely 100%. Just additional information on terms of what the bus driver needs to consider on boarding and alighting. They need to focus on the front doors and the rear doors, and the passengers that are seated. They also need to deal with the securing the person boarding the wheelchair. Here, in this case, is a wheelchair lift, and this is a bus with steps. It's a lot easier with the low-floor buses to do the same maneuver. This is just the design of either the front door or the rear door wheelchair lift. There are 4 other types of situations that I briefly touched on that need to be considered. That's collision with pedestrians, and we classify them as 4 types. Type 1 being the right turn collision with a pedestrian. Type 2 being the left turn collision with a pedestrian. Type 3 is bus stop, pulling to the bus stop, and Type 4 is pulling out from the bus stop. And these are just examples of these, and of course these accidents occur because there is a reduced visibility of that pedestrian and the failure on part of the operator to provide proper scanning to ensure that there is no one in that path, and that goes for both the right and left turn. And there are many mitigations, and these are some of the mitigations for turn collisions. This is the Type 3. We have to make sure that everybody is secure on the bus stop before pulling into the bus stop. Of course, this is all, common sense and information that really we all understand. And these are some of the mitigations that help improve the interface between the bus and the bus stop. And of course, this is a Type 4 collision. This tends to occur when somebody chases after the bus, or somebody thinks they can cross in front of the bus before it pulls out, or an adult sends a young child as an advance to try to knock on the door to get the bus driver to stop. And as the child approaches the bus stop, the child is approaching the bus stop not from the bus stop, or from the roadway, and you can see that could have disastrous consequences as well. And these are some of the mitigations that can be applied to reduce that type of injury as well. It brings us now to onboard safety, and that is the non-collision accidents. and this is very important. It represents a significant part of the types of accidents that occur in terms of passengers. Passengers are very vulnerable when they're on the buses. If they're standing, they're more vulnerable than if they're seated, and yet if the bus accelerates too fast, then we can also have a problem. Matt, I see there's a question on the chat. Matt?
I did not receive it, but if you did, go for it.
It says, what safety literature or standards exists for bus monitors to remain seated while bus is moving versus standing? What safety standard is the driver subject to regarding speed and avoiding bumps? Well, the bus operator is always responsible that the bus operates in a smooth manner and that the passengers are always secure. And I covered some of those topics towards the end where I talk about the standard of care that a bus operator should apply in terms of their passengers. So that, for the care, the ride should be smooth again, and that the passengers should be secure.
Right. We have another question here from Lawrence, and I apologize, Carl, I didn't receive a copy of that question. From Lawrence, if the seat belting system for strapping in a wheelchair does not work right when the driver is trying to secure the passenger, what should the driver do?
I think it should ask if it's a bus that's called for that purpose, like a paratransit bus. That's a good question. I think they would need to call for a second bus. That driver should wait until that second bus comes. If it's a standard transit bus and it doesn't work, then I would ask that party to wait for the next bus. I would not have a person in a wheelchair on a bus where that wheelchair is not secured. It may sound
any other questions? Yes. Carl, I don't see any other questions in the queue, so why don't we continue on with the presentation?
These are some of the causes of the onboard injuries. I covered some of them in a brief matter, but this is just a summary of those types of injuries that occur to passengers on board buses. The non-collision accidents are generally classified into these six categories: onboard stopping, lighting the bus, that's the stairs, other passenger injuries as a result of defective equipment, somebody throwing something at a bus window. And recently there was an article in the paper where a rock was thrown through a bus, and unfortunately the person went into a coma that was hit by the rock and ultimately died because the window was open. That was kind of a sad situation. It was recently posted on the internet. Boarding the bus, slipping on the steps, being struck by the doors, standing up on the bus and attempting to be seated, and the bus takes off before you have an opportunity to be seated. Those kinds of things are the types of non-collision accidents that occur all the time.
Carl, with regard to non-collision incidents or accidents, Craig asked, if a bus stops short, is the passenger blamed for her own injuries if hurt in a fall while standing and preparing to disembark? So where does the liability stand if a bus driver stops short and the passenger is standing and preparing to disembark and he or she gets hurt?
Well, the person should wait until the bus stops before they stand to disembark. But why did the bus stop short? Was it for an emergency? In reaction to somebody a vehicle that cut off the bus, or a pedestrian that jumped in front of the bus? It's not that simple a question. In general, if the bus acts in a sudden and violent manner, then that responsibility is a result of the poor performance of the bus operator. So we need to know more about the situation. Was this that the bus passenger should remain seated until the bus comes to a stop?
Okay, thank you, Carl.
Can I continue? Is that right?
Yes, I don't see any other questions in the queue. Please continue.
Okay. A lot of the non-collision accidents are motion-related. That's the sudden deceleration, standing in the aisle when there are seats available, not holding on to the various vertical stanchions or or handholds that are available, the force due to acceleration, deceleration, if it exceeds the jerk rate. And as a result of these falls sometimes, the surfaces of the interior of the bus can make the injury even more severe than just falling. And especially we need to be particularly concerned when dealing with older persons. Almost all buses have the front seats that are designated for disabled and elderly, and those seats should be made available by whoever's using those seats to these individuals when they board the bus. I tested it out the other day for my wife on the subway, and I just pointed to my wife, to the person seated in the seats that were designated for the elderly, and my wife was a bit embarrassed, but they got up and gave my wife the seat. Some of the falls due to slips and falls, the walking surface, materials on the floor of the bus. In the wintertime, especially in the northern regions, we have ice. Snow and liquids get brought onto the bus, and because of the cold temperatures, ice sometimes forms on the steps. Sometimes the walking surfaces, because of wear and tear, become not level, and sometimes the surfaces even become loose. And this is important that in a pre-inspection of the bus, not only the bus operator, but the terminal facility people should be inspecting the bus to make sure that the bus is fit for service. These are some of the locations where these accidents occur and can be reduced by the kneeling bus feature or the low floor bus feature, and that is the getting on and getting off of the bus. These are the national standards of care for riser and treads, and unfortunately in many cases buses do not meet these standards, especially if the bus stops on the pavement rather than at the bus stop where you have the additional 5 or 6 inches of the curb. And the risers and treads need to fall within these categories to be safe. When they don't fall within these categories, we create a problem for the bus passenger in their ability to use the steps safely. The bus passenger has a normal gait. In order for them to maintain their normal gait, they must experience normal rises and tread measurements. This is basically what I mentioned, the basic standard of care for passengers, the kinds of things that need to be done from before taking the bus out of the terminal, the first stop, or when the bus driver takes over the bus from another bus operator. These are the kinds of things they need to take into consideration. And in starting and stopping the bus, these are things that need to be considered, that we have to move smoothly and that at an even rate, and that we also need to be sure that the passengers are secure and that everything we do is with the passenger's safety in mind. And we always need to take advantage of the safety devices that are provided to us through the mirrors to ensure the safety of the onboard passengers and the pedestrians that are in the environment outside the bus. And I find this to be very important. When we talk about the passenger being secure, this is just a dictionary definition. I don't think we need a special glossary definition. I think we all know what the word secure means, and that's what we need to be concerned about, that every passenger on a bus is secure. We can also make improvements to the roadway, and roadway design improvements can also help improve bus operations, and these are some of the bus design improvements that can be implemented to improve bus operations, such as also in some areas it's important to have the bus turn in the proper design so that the bus doesn't end up on the sidewalk while it's making its turn. We've all seen buses making turns and crossing onto the sidewalk area. And also this is some approaches to what would be an ideal intersection design. Other things that are being done are bus turnouts and pullouts to take the bus out of the traffic queue and make the operation better for the bus and as well for the traffic. This is something that's being tested in a few states right now, and that's where the bus is given priority. You've seen this yourselves. We all tend not to give the bus an opportunity to leave the bus stop and get back into the queue, the traffic queue. In several states, they've now introduced what we call yield to bus. That it's a traffic regulation and requirement that the bus be allowed back into the queue, and that the bus gets a priority over the traffic. This is finding its way into all buses, and this is based on an article that just appeared in my local newspaper, and there's already a fight with the union. They are putting 2 cameras in the buses on Long Island, one to watch the bus driver, the other to watch the road ahead. And the bus drivers are not very happy with the implementation of this technology. These are some of the pictures and information that we can obtain if we do have these video cameras. I think the video cameras are very important. They're an important training tool. They're important also to give us information if something happens, so that we can learn about that incident and also use that information to improve the operation of our system in the future. It provides very useful information to improving the safety of our transit operation or bus operation. Again, one thing we want to keep in mind is safety, safety, safety. It's just like in real estate, location, location. In transportation, it's safety, safety, safety. And I thank everybody for listening. And I'm sure if you have more time, you can go back and look at some of the slides that you found of interest and pick up additional information. Are there any additional questions on that?
I don't see any questions in the queue. To all the attendees out there, if you do have any final questions for Carl, please use the chat feature or the Q&A feature to submit them. Carl, thank you for the time and the effort that you put into the presentation, as well as the speed at which you went through the slides. We got all the slides in, and I think there was a lot of information for the attendees to take away. So thank you for your time and effort. And for everybody in attendance, thank you for taking an hour out of your day to spend with us. Just very briefly, want to wrap things up here. If you'd like to speak to Dr. Berkowitz about a case or project that you're working on, you can contact us here at TASA. Our telephone number is 800-523-2319, and we'll get you in touch with Dr. Berkowitz as soon as we can. We'll be sending out the link to the archived recording of this webinar tomorrow morning. The archived recording will also be posted in the Knowledge Center on TASA's website. If you visit our website, tasanet.com, and click on the Knowledge Center tab at the top of the screen, you'll be directed to a library of all of our previous programs. Our next webinar for the Legal Professional Survey Research Methods will take place on July 10th, 2012 at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Look for an invitation from me shortly. And if you have any follow-up questions or comments, please feel free to email me. My email address is mhyde@tasanet.com. We do take all of your comments under consideration, and they help us to produce better programs. With that, I don't see any other questions in the queue, so I will end this afternoon's webinar. Thank you for all your attention.